So let's bring up another problem. Or rather, let's not so much formulate it, as simply mention it. This is the problem of resolve, which also goes by another name. In both philosophy and psychology, this is the problem of free will. It's an age-old problem, but I'd like to have a psychologist, not a philosopher, explain it to us. Because, after all, it's best to discuss these things with someone who is close to your own field. And we know just the psychologist for the job. William James. We're bringing in James to help us understand what this resolve or free will really is. Let's break it down. We have a problem. Does free will exist? Like any problem, it has two possible answers, a no and a yes. First, let's consider the no answer. Let's say one of us decides free will does not exist. What does this mean for a psychologist? It means that all of a person's behavior, all their activity, their actions and so on, can be explained by external causes. Every action has an external explanation. For example, and this is a very crude illustration of a point, one might say a person is kind because they are of a certain nationality, while another is unkind because they belong to a different nationality. To use a more serious term, if there is no free will, then a complete cause and effect or deterministic explanation of behavior is possible. The chain of cause and effect is never broken. This means a person has no genuine internal activity of their own. They have no agency. If everything is explained by external causes, then the person themselves has no real part in it. They aren't responsible for anything. They have no true inner freedom. Okay, and what if free will does exist? In short, it means a person acknowledges they have an inner activity, the ability to act independently, on their own terms, sometimes even in defiance of external circumstances. And this brings us back to William James. He discusses this at the very end of his foundational book, The Principle of Psychology. In fact, he considers the problem of the will to be the central issue for psychology, especially for the psychology of personality. And he reasons like this. He says, imagine I am a researcher. I'm trying to scientifically prove whether free will exists or not. I gather facts, people's actions, animal behaviors, and so on, and I place all these facts on two sides of a scale, one for existence of free will and one against. And then, to skip the details, James comes to a conclusion. It is impossible to prove the existence of free will. It's simply not possible to prove it through rational means. And here, one could say it's not just impossible, but perhaps that one shouldn't even try. My apologies to those who don't catch this hint right away. Why? Because if you could explain free will rationally, you would destroy it in the process. If you can explain freedom in a completely deterministic way, it's no longer freedom, it's something else. So James say it cannot be proven scientifically. What then is one to do? We must do what we do in life, not in the pursuit of knowledge. James weighed the evidence on his scales for a long time, and then he essentially threw up his hands and said, there is no need to weigh anything. James says, I'm not a researcher anymore, I'm just a person, and now I am making a decision. Free will exists. And that, he says, is the first act of my free will. I hope that's clear. He thought about it for a long time. And And when realized, this isn't something to be figured out or known, it's something you must decide. You have to take a risk. And so he took that risk, and that very act was the first expression of his own free will. This is something that can happen for anyone, if it happens. And there is a famous parable that perfectly concludes this short discussion of dreams. It's a story that exists in almost every culture, and in its general form, it goes like this. Two frogs fall into a vat of cream. It's a liquid, milky substance, and there's nothing to hold onto, so they're drowning. In other words, you have two subjects, and these subjects are in a fatal situation. They are in the exact same external circumstances, and those circumstances are deadly. Of course, this isn't really about two frogs. It's about two subjects who answer the question of free will differently. The first subjects say, free will does not exist. This means I have no internal activity of my own. Everything depends on external circumstances, and these circumstances are fatal. So why struggle? What's the point? It folds its legs and drowns. But how does the other one act? It says free will exists. And so, what can it do? The circumstances are exactly the same. The only thing it can do in this situation is to continue moving its legs, absolutely without any logical reason. Or, in other words, to express its own activity. As James would say, a willful act, strictly speaking, is irrational. The purpose of this activity is unclear. And then, as we know, completely unexpectedly for this subject, the cream gets turned into butter. Did it know in advance that the cream would turn into butter? No, it had no idea. But it happened. And so, we ask, which of them was right? As we always say, in life, everyone is right. Both of them were right. The decision each one made determined the result they got. Each one proved themselves correct. One drowned, so for them free will doesn't exist. The other survived, so for them it does exist. And so we're talking about life.
И один субъект говорит, свободы воли нет.